Hi, so months ago there was a random Gauntlet contest. In this contest, you make a GD level, but with some random twists happening each run. The contest produced loads of impressive levels, cleverly making use of the randomness. And my level somehow became one of the winners? So in this video, I'm going to talk about the creation process of this level. This includes the true purpose of these evil orbs, how Silk Song significantly enhanced my level, and the movement mechanism of the Egyptian anime girl. Now before we talk about the level itself, let's go back to March of 2025. The results of the Space Gauntlet contest came out, and there are 7 mythics? Half of the legendaries don't even get to top 20? Epics stand no chance at all? Fast forward to July 2025, the random Gauntlet contest was announced and I got flashbacks of the space contest. So the minimum goal was to get a legendary ratings that I can at least stand a chance among the entries. And getting a legendary rating felt like a massive wall. How do they even make this? Is it even possible at my skill level? But I had to really try my best. About the contest itself, there's a gimmick where you have to use random triggers. And a long time ago, there was a Discord Gauntlet contest where a gimmick is to make 2 different modes for your level. Speaking from experience, in these gimmick Gauntlet contests, judges really care about the usage of those gimmicks. Radiant Glen by Nos had one of the best decorations from the entire contest, but it ended up being only 10th place because it didn't make good use of the gimmick. The level just changes colors between the 2 modes, whereas the other levels has significant differences between those 2. And you can see why I fluffed it at the contest. So in this random contest, I thought the randomness had to change the level in some major way. Changing a little bit of gameplay or colors wouldn't be enough. The main mechanic for this level is split pass. It isn't the most creative use of the randomness, but it can show substantial changes between the 2 routes. Now how should I make 2 themes? Answer: just copy the album cover of the song. It has a red part and a purple part, so the level also has a red part and a purple part. Of course, we learned that the colors being the only change won't end up well, so we arbitrarily associate each color with fire and darkness. And to add some dynamics, randomly switch between those themes multiple times instead of letting them choose at the start. Now we have a Discord Gauntlet entry, except it isn't. And then we need a method to switch between 2 themes. This is done with these random orbs. The premise is simple: the orb flickers between the 2 orb effects, and when you click the orb, one of the effects happens randomly. It's simple, but it tells where things get randomized and how it gets randomized in a very intuitive way. It's a pretty common gimmick when it comes to the random Gauntlet entries, but the major difference is that the orb is not predetermined when you see it. By not selecting the path in advance, you must react quickly to whatever path you are given. I thought this made the level more fun by introducing sudden changes. Of course, I made sure you get enough time to react on both paths. Since we know how the randomization is done, let's dive into the actual gameplay. One of the noticeable features of the level is that it uses fake orbs with no X marks in a big 2025. I swear it serves a bigger purpose than haha get trolled. In games themed around underground exploration, you can typically find nasty traps. Why would developers want to kill players by adding these? I think there are 2 main reasons to do so. First, it sets up the narrative. When there are deadly traps in the environment, you know this place is unfriendly to you. Second, it encourages acting carefully. Traps usually have hints about where they activate, and you might not notice those if you're not paying attention. So you have to look carefully at your surroundings to avoid certain death. But if I put those traps directly into a geometry dash level, especially a non-demon level, the comment section will burn. And traps are not a nice fit in an auto-scroller game where you can't stop and look around. The fake orb was a nice balance between being sight-readable and setting up the environment. Another one of the less noticeable features of the level is that each theme only uses restricted types of orbs and paths. The fire path only uses pink, yellow and red ones, and the shadow path only uses blue and purple ones. I thought it would be nice to be able to tell the difference between the 2 paths even without the decoration. Designing gameplay with this limitation was tough sometimes, but it was a fun challenge. Finally, the most unnoticeable feature of the level is that the gameplay has a progression. The first part introduces the random orb gimmick. You will run into the simplest setup, 1 random orb and 2 split paths. The second part familiarizes you with these random orbs. Those are going to tell you every time a random orb appears, you are gonna put into one of the 2 paths. And regardless of the path chosen, you will see the first fake here. After this, you know you need to be cautious before clicking at those orbs or touching paths. The third and fourth parts are where things get real. You'll have to deal with the longer section and more varied setups with fakes. The upper pass will always have the ball or ship mode, and the lower pass will always have the spider or wave mode. It helps with the distinction of the two paths, but having one game mode for the one entire part may be boring. This is where the randomization comes in and changes the game mode every 1/3 of the part, making the gameplay fresher. Things switch up after reaching the 5th part. Just a few orbs were random so far, now all orbs are random. Instead, all orbs are changed at specific timings, so they are somewhat predetermined when you see them. And there are no orbs shortly after the switch to ensure the gameplay is fair and square. The branching paths became more complex in this part, so you need to identify the path you are going by looking at the orbs. In the last part, there's a boss fight. We needed more randomized boss fights that aren't just following arrows after all, and I didn't really make the gameplay for it in the layout stage. I just made a plan that there will be 3 attacks chosen randomly and 1 last fixed attack and left it at that. I thought it would be easier to work on the deco and the gameplay at the same time when it comes to boss fights. Okay, now the layout is done. It's time to decorate now. For the decoration process in general, each part took like 1 week to make. The steps are drawing the concept art, implementing one screen in the editor, copy-pasting stuff for the wall part, and then adding extra details like creatures. The concept art part is a noteworthy step since this level was the first time I adopted this method. Drawing concept art is basically making a prototype for a part before placing objects in the actual GD editor. This may seem like wasting time because I am spending time outside the editor, but in the end, this helped me create the level faster. I collect some reference images, sketch some stuff on top of the layout image, add colors, fix colors, and repeat the above steps in random order. The major advantage of the concept art is that it's very easy to change. In my previous levels, I can't count how many times I procrastinated on creating a part in the fear of what if it doesn't look good. I know changing stuff in the GD editor can be painful. The concept art doesn't have to look good because I'm going to change that anyway. The block design doesn't look good? Just draw it again in minutes. Another pro of this approach is that I can materialize the vision for the part without having to implement everything. So I can check the whole picture in a quicker and easier way. I guess making a bad version for anything creative results in a better version in the end. Now I will go through each part and talk about cool things there. Maybe you can apply some of them into your level. This first part is a pyramid entrance with a chill and dark atmosphere. This part is some kind of mix of blocks from Prince of Persia and a pyramid from Terraria. It doesn't show the fire and shadow theming so far, but if you know kanji, you can see this coming from the background. Don't ask me why there is kanji in an Egyptian pyramid, by the way. If you look closely at the block design, you can see there are low opacity pixel blocks overlaid on the top of the blocks. This is called texturization. It does wonders at adding something more to the block design without too much effort. You can see this technique applied in literally every block design. The second part starts to introduce the fire and shadow concept, more like the red and purple colors rather than the elements themselves. As you pick one of the two paths here, the path you take will flash alongside some nice effects, then the other path will be darkened. This naturally draws attention to the path you are going to, and it just makes this part more satisfying to play than it's supposed to. Also, if you look closely at multiple blocks, you might notice each block is a little different. No, I'm not talking about the symbols. That's because I added some of those blocks to a certain group number and gave a pulse trigger that slightly changes the shoe value. It's a subtle change, but it does a good job at reducing the repetitiveness of the block design. Now this third part is where the fire and shadow elements become more apparent. It's also the part where my workload gets doubled because the level has to be a good Discord Gauntlet contest entry. Let's start with the fire path. This place is called Lava Sewers and is a mixture of Core from Celeste, first part from Skeletal Shenanigans, Eternal Prison from La Mulana 2, and lava-themed levels from New Super Mario Bros. DS. From here onwards, you can see those cat-shaped structures foreshadowing the boss fight. And moving on to the Shadow Pass, this place is called Shadow Sanctuary. It's mostly a ripoff of the Dark Sanctuary from Deltarune, with a bit of Soul Sanction from Hollow Knight, and some random Sanctuary images. When I was working on those parts, Silphsong came out, so I abandoned everything and went to fight the first boss. The first boss was so tough that I struggled for hours. Honestly, I felt it was so unbalanced. But after that, the experience got so much better, and after spending about 50 hours, I saw the true ending. Anyway, the important takeaway from the Silksong experience was that I learned a lot about the game art techniques, especially regarding the particle usage. The particles in Silksong were used mainly for two things: to add extra spice to the environment and to give extra feedback for the actions. For example, in the lava sewers part, I stole fire particles from deep docks to apply as environment particles in my level. Also, I stole the spiky particles created when Hornet dashes and applied to basically everywhere, especially when something dashes or a collision happens. I don't know why, but this particle setup is so versatile that it can be used in like every impactful situation. So the two routes are decorated with their respective theme, but there's one problem. Due to how the randomization works, one route would be divided into 3 sections. If a player goes to one section, they have seen the decoration of this whole route. The first section is not much different from the second, third section aside from the gameplay, and it reduces the replayability of the level. So I needed a way to make each section unique while keeping the theme consistent. That's why I added these scoopy little creatures across the level. Adding these took about 2 extra days per part, so in total 8 days were spent on animating little characters. As a result, there's always something that catches your eye for each section, which helps a lot with replayability. The fourth part is where the two elements become more intense. There's an infernal overflow route, and if you've played Aberrance, you can probably guess where this comes from. Deep Docks from Silksong is also mixed here again. And there's another route called Valley of the Dead, and which is basically Blasted Steps per purple. A little bit of Gate of the Dead from La Mulana 2 is also mixed there. I think I didn't talk much about the animation of the little creatures, so let's talk about that. As you know, the 2.2 update added this keyframe trigger. Let's assume this trigger doesn't exist and animate those bricks falling down. We can use move triggers and rotate triggers to achieve that. However, all bricks falling down in the exact same trajectory doesn't look very natural, so let's add some variation by adjusting parameters. Unfortunately, this can be very tedious since we have to change multiple triggers to add the variation for one block. Now let's use an advanced technology instead of rocks and branches. We need to add keyframes for the falling animation and put those keyframes in one group. And we can make a brick fall by using only one keyframe trigger for each brick. However, the real strength of the keyframe triggers comes from the fact that it's very easy to make movement variations. We just have to change the parameters for only one trigger. If you made one animation setup, it's simple to reuse it in multiple contexts. It makes the keyframe trigger one of the most powerful triggers added in 2.2. You can see this falling animation everywhere in the level. It plays a nice role of supplementing the character animations. Speaking of the supplement, sometimes animating a creature may not be enough. It needs supplements like particles or environmental interactions to make it really shine. I realized that while animating this worm in the shadow route. Shoutout to Hollow Knight again, by the way. Looking at this worm animation, it kinda looks dull and unimpactful. Now let's add some particles and environment interactions, namely surrounding pillars. The worm itself remains unchanged, but the motion looks a lot more impactful than before. Okay, this transition isn't technically a part, but it took as long as time to make the other parts, so it deserves a mention here. The design takes heavy inspiration from City of Gold, a region in Spelunky 2, with some mix of Takamagahara Shrine from La Mulana 2 and the Last Judge Arena from Silksong. After this fake out ending that Nexus loves for some reason, you are sent to this arena of floating bricks. The visuals are a mixture of a lot of stuff: the lava escape sequence from Silksong, Volcano from Spelunky 2, Eternal Prison from La Mulana 2 again, Space-Time Continuum by Destasy, and the part where buildings crumble in Anonymous M. The zoomed out camera, rock and fire particles, and negative spaces emphasize the grandness of this place. I should talk about the optimization of this part because this part lagged a lot for my potato device and probably for many others. Area triggers are cool and all, but when they are misused they can produce a lot of heaters. Fortunately, you can reduce the lag by splitting the area triggers. Let's say the initial area trigger setup looks like this, using only one group. In my case, first I separated the blocks into the 3 groups, then split the area triggers so they are activated at different timings and regroup them. Lastly, and most importantly, I use the stock triggers for the area triggers when the blocks for their respective groups are no longer seen. This reduces the workload of the device despite the visuals looking the same. For this part, while I probably put more details here and there, making it look empty was intentional. The gameplay is rather complicated here, so I wanted to put fewer distractions for analyzing the layout, while also making the girl in the background more visible. And well, it's time. Yeah, seems like nothing has changed after the Muse Rush incident. Anyway, this last part is obviously the part that took the most time to make. The entire level was made in 3 months, and this part alone took 3 weeks. So if I knew what I was doing in advance, it would probably take 1 week less because this first jump animation alone took forever and went through a lot of divisions. Thankfully, animations afterwards didn't take as much as long since I got more comfortable with the workflow. Before talking about how I animated this, let's talk about the character design. Starting with her name, the thought process was like this. Okay, random Gauntlet. Let's take the word random. Since the song name is Curse of Khartoum, let's add K in front of that. But Crandom doesn't sound very good. Let's slightly change the last alphabet. Crandom. You can tell the name was decided in like 30 seconds. Now moving on to our appearance, it took a lot of inspiration from Sorceress in Spelunky 2. To reflect the theme of the level, fire and shadow, a red and purple combo is used for the eyes and the clothing. So that was the character design. Let's talk about the boss fight itself. Just before starting the fight, she picks 3 numbers to decide which attack to use. 1 is the laser attack, 2 is the pillar attack, and so on. When picking the numbers, she checks if all numbers are unique. If not, re-roll it so the same attack pattern doesn't appear twice in a run. After that, we can finally start the boss fight. I will start with the general animation techniques I learned during the process and then talk about how to implement those in the GD editor. So there's a thing called 12 principles of animation, and I'll talk about only 5 of those because I'm too lazy to learn all of them. If you wanna know more detailed info about this, there's a cool video made by Alan Becker, which is what I watched to learn. So there are 2 methods to draw the animation. In the straight ahead method, an animator draws each frame from beginning to end, while in the pose to pose method, they draw important frames first and fill in intervals later. Luckily, the keyframe system will automatically fill intervals for us, so naturally we are choosing the pose to pose method. To implement this in GD, trace each body part by using the vest mod in GD, give them a groom number, give one object a pink groom number, turn on the preview mode for keyframes, put each keyframe in the exact position, copy those keyframes, and then modify those to create the poses. Then add those keyframes to a group, place the triggers, and play the animation. Something isn't quite right. Here comes a new principle, slow in and slow out. Real-world objects don't change speed instantly. They need time to accelerate and slow down. To reflect this, let's change the easing settings. For the acceleration, I personally like to use ease in with the easing rate of 4, and to slow down, I use exponential out with a fairly long easing time, just because ease out is broken for some reason and exponential is the next best thing. Okay, it's now looking pretty good, but we can do something more with this. Introducing the arc principle. Natural actions tend to follow a circular curve known as an arc, rather than traveling in a straight line. As we can see, the line between the keyframes is straight, so let's change it to curve. We have to put in-betweens as rep only in order to see the effect. Since it's required to make a new frame, it's the most demanding principle to apply in GD. Well, the effect is not very noticeable here honestly. However, there are times where it's essential, especially if the difference between 2 key poses is considerable, like this slashing animation. Making rep only in-betweens is a must, or the animation will have weird moments like this. Since the vase is pretty much done, it's time to add some spice called drag. When a character starts to move, parts of them would catch up a few frames later. So let's put the hair keyframe to a different group number and place the keyframe trigger for the hair slightly to the right. It's a pretty subtle one, but it can help the movements more realistic. Okay, the motion looks pretty nice and all, but it can be limiting to do everything with only this set of images. So let's add a big one, view changing, bringing Silksong for one last time. One thing I've noticed about the last Judge boss fight is that the boss doesn't stay at this 3/4 side view. It changes its view for some attacks to make the movement more dynamic. It's a form of the solid drawing principle, which is about taking 3-dimensional space into account when animating. In order to put this into GD, draw some new keyframes, and use toggle triggers to switch between the views. We added the major state switching. Now let's add minor state switching such as eye blinking or a hand posture change. In this case, making new keyframes is overkill. We can just use an existing body part and add new states there, switching via toggle triggers. Except there's one problem. For some reason, every state or body part shows at once in the preview art mode, resulting in this abomination. So instead, let's use the color channel trick. Take the colors of an open eye, set other colors to copy color with the alpha of 0, and apply that to another state of the eye, namely closed eye. Now the preview art will only show the opened eye state. And to change the state, we can switch the alpha values of the channels. Cool. So the boss fight is basically those that repeated like 100 times. It was the toughest creating experience in GD. I had to watch certain animation over and over hoping to learn something, even making some of the motions myself, and stressing over those movements not being good enough. But I'm satisfied with the end result and it was an invaluable learning experience. Before ending this section, I will make one last note in case someone wants to try this. So you probably won't use over 5000 keyframes in one level like me, but when you make some progress with the animation, turn off the preview art. If you don't, every time you open the editor, you will waste 10 years of your life. I wish I knew this sooner because I already wasted 10,000 years. Now that the level is pretty much finished, it was time to finally publish it. Before that, I had to make some last minute decisions. For example, this level was meant to be 7 stars at first, but it was kinda at the borderline of the 7 or 8 stars according to playtesters. Also, the fake orbs might make the level harder than intended for some players. As a wise Cologne once said,
so when in doubt, overgrade a little bit.
So I did, it became 8 stars. It ended up contributing to the staggering lack of 6-7 stars in the contest, but whatever. Also, I decided to release a level earlier before the deadline, because real life stuff was getting in the way and my entry would be overshadowed if I released it later. That did mean I had to sacrifice things I had planned. For example, the boss was going to have 6 types of attacks, but it was reduced to 4 because making each one was too exhausting. Also, the level could have an end screen better than this, but in the end, I'm satisfied with how the level turned out. As the days went by, more and more random Gauntlet entries were being released. Fortunately for me, the levels made for this contest weren't as shocking as the Space Gauntlet contest, probably because the limitation was more constraining in the random contest. Still, this contest produced some of my favorite levels in GD, so I wanted to briefly mention them in this section. Dronification by Ibitio features the 2-player gimmick gameplay. The gameplay randomization really asks you to get familiar with the 2-player controls, and it was a blast to learn and complete. Fukashigi by TRMS01 has a unique theme of dark web, featuring insane 3D effects and outstanding song representation. Limini by Whispros has a variety of unique gameplay ideas, and all of them play so well around the random gimmick. This pick a path section where you have to identify the possible route is my favorite out of a bunch. And finally, Project Nova Form by Blovia and Ghostly features 2 boss fights that utilize the custom parry mechanic. The randomization works really well with the boss fights, and some of the attack patterns are absolute cinema to watch and dodge. Now the contest was over and I was waiting for the results video to come out. I wasn't sure about getting in the Gauntlet, but minimal goal was to get a legendary rating, which was already achieved anyway, so I would be happy with whichever place it gets. And somehow I won? Wow, you guys really like anime girls. It feels so surreal to win in a contest as big as this, where a bunch of talented people in this community join in. At the same time, it feels like my efforts finally came into fruition after participating in 4 official Gauntlet contests starting from the Discord one. But more importantly, I learned a ton while making this level, and there were a number of people who liked the ideas, theme, or gameplay of this level. So thank you to all who supported. Also thanks to RobTop, Bifrin, and many others for hosting the Gauntlet contest from time to time. Every time it was a blast to join in, and I can't wait to see what the next one will be. Also thanks to all playtesters and people who made inspiring works. This level wouldn't be as good as this without your inputs. Finally, thank you for watching. I'm striving to create better animation-centric levels that may or may not include anime girls, so please subscribe if it's something that interests you. Okay, see ya!